What we have is a list of phone numbers that were targeted, and you are among them.
And what does that program do?
It's transmitting your messages, your images, just everything that's happened on your phone.
Shit.
Your phone was compromised.
They send an attack, steal a bunch of data. The moment they do it, the phone is compromised. They can exfiltrate whatever they want. It's just pretty much automatic.
We have access to a lot of information about a massive surveillance campaign all over the world. That's exclusive materials. It's about who is spying on who in many countries.
Journalist Jamal Khashoggi was killed inside their consulate in Istanbul.
His close friends were surveilled after the murder.
Es la constatación de un espionaje planetario, de un gran crimen mundial. Es una bomba atómica.
Just allowed the controversial military-linked surveillance firm NSO Group to continue to sell its spyware to everyone in Israel and outside of Israel. A Tel Aviv district court rejected an attempt, supported by Amnesty International, which sought to force the Israeli military to revoke the security export license of spyware company NSO Group. Amnesty International previously demanded Israeli authorities revoke NSO Group's export license over fears it would help human rights abusers inside and outside of Israel continue to violate human rights unabated.
Pegasus is one of the most powerful bits of spyware ever made. It's easily installed, almost impossible to detect, and even harder to get rid of. What's more, it gives the attacker root access to the victim's phone, allowing them to take complete control.
So it's pretty much turning your phone into like something that's spying you all the time in your pocket, which is extremely invasive and extremely dangerous for a lot of activists and journalists.
Pegasus can slip into a phone in a number of ways, via a malicious link that the user is tricked into clicking, over the air via a nearby transceiver, manually by hacking a stolen phone, or the most covert, the zero-click approach, which exploits an app's weakness to enter the phone without any action on the user's part. Once they're in, the attacker can remotely control virtually any part of the phone. They can read messages, look at photos and videos, access contacts and calendar data, and track its location using GPS. Pegasus can even use the microphone and camera and record keystrokes, meaning that anything being typed, a password for instance, can be known to the hacker. The phone won't show any sign of being infected besides the faintest traces of abnormal software processes. And even if you knew Pegasus was on your phone, you'd have to turn it off for good to stop being spied on. Researchers say the malware can survive even a factory reset.
The group behind investigating this story is Forbidden Stories, and its founder, Laurent Richard, joins me now. Laurent, thank you so much for your time. Firstly, how did this story come to your attention?
Well, all of this starts with a leak we did have access to with Amnesty International Security Lab and Forbidden Stories. We did have access to that list with 50,000 numbers of that were entered into the NSO system by NSO customers. NSO is a company, it's an Israeli company that is selling a software called Pegasus to state actors, to governments who want to spy. Officially, this software is officially used against criminals, against terrorists, but what we are discovering and what we are revealing with the Pegasus project is that this software has been massively misused against civil society, against journalists, against human rights defenders, against lawyers, against head of states. So we received that leak with a lot of numbers, and we spent months in identifying numbers, who were the person behind the numbers. And we found out that there were a lot of journalists all over the world who were targeted. The victims are in more than 50 countries, targeted by 10 states. And we approached some of them, and we were able to do some technical investigation into the device itself. And then we found out traces of infection, and those traces were linked to that company, NSO Group. This is the very first time we find evidence in that kind of cyber surveillance scandal. That's the very first time we show faces of the victims. So this is what the product is about.
Laurent, can you give us some examples of where it was used the most? In which countries it's, particularly been used?
Yeah, there is several examples. Like the fiancé of Jamal Khashoggi, right after the killing of Jamal, while she was waiting in front of the consulate, waiting to know what was happening, and 2 days before, his husband was killed inside the consulate. At that very moment, she was surveilled, and we found traces of that. We found out that the journalist from Azerbaijan, Khadija Ismailova, who was jailed for more than 1 year, was already surveilled, was also on the list, and we did find some traces as well. But you have also some Moroccan journalists, you have a lot of Mexican journalists. You have one case of one Mexican journalist who was in that, the phone numbers was in the list, and 2 months later, Cecilio Pineda was killed. So you have several examples showing you how this software can be used against what kind of journalists.
From what I gather, this spyware is almost impossible to detect on your phone. So what needs to be done to stop the use of such malware?
Yeah, that's the very bad news of the story, that you don't know that you hacked. You don't know because it's an invisible attack. You don't know because you have no sign, no sound. You cannot see nothing about that. It's the few years ago, you were receiving a text and you were clicking on the text, on the link, and that was malicious. Now it's over. They are using techniques that you cannot see. It's invisible. So there's one thing you can do is to know that, but the other thing is not up to citizens, because so far, right now, there is nothing to defend the citizen. Nobody can get the evidence, nobody can sue, and there is no regulation for that either.
And how do you do it when a number of those using it are using it against their own citizens? In other words, there are governments who are using it themselves.
Yeah, you can do. Basically, there is nothing you can do except that your governments won't buy anymore that and won't use anymore that kind of software.
According to a New York Times report, Israeli spyware was again used, this time by the Mexican government, to target journalists investigating the cartels, all of whom are colleagues of investigative reporter Javier Valdez, who was killed last year.
In its lawsuit, Amnesty International pointed to a 2018 hacking attempt of one of its own staffers, which allegedly bore the hallmarks of NSO spyware technology. The firm is also accused by Facebook WhatsApp of being behind hacking their systems. It is also accused of selling its spyware to human rights abusers by Amnesty International and others. Facebook claims NSO's products were behind a hacking attempt on 1,400 users on its WhatsApp platform. Inside Israel, it is part of a larger surveillance system that includes intelligence agencies, military, and the private sector, all working together to produce their products and to target Israeli citizens in Israel and Palestinians in occupied territories with impunity. Now, Israelis are complaining that such measures violate their rights and free will and go contrary to Israel's claim of being the only democracy in Western Asia. The cycle of Israel's spies and spyware makers begins at an early age in the military, where they are picked based on their abilities and taught on spyware and related technologies. For years now, NSO Group has been accused of using its technology to spy on activists, lawyers, and journalists. Its Pegasus spyware, for instance, can secretly take over iOS and Android-based smartphones to record phone calls, track the device's location, and hijack the camera, according to security researchers. Those arguments weren't enough to sway the Tel Aviv court. According to the Jerusalem Post, the court said Israel's army had a vigorous vetting process in place when it issued the export license to NSO Group.
I, together with a group of 22 activists from Amnesty International, filed a petition against the Israeli Ministry of Defense asking for a court order to cancel the export license that the Israeli defense company called the NSO export to a country that is unknown for us, and its system that is being used, according to many reports in the media in the last year, for violating the rights of human rights activists, diplomats, human rights lawyers, journalists that expose corruption. The system this time, according to our claim, was used to attack activists in the staff of Amnesty International. And to us, as Israeli citizens, this is an earthquake. It's a trying by NSO or the country that got the system from it to attack the system of human rights all around the world.
The same ministry also has the power to revoke the license if abuses are found. Amnesty International called the ruling disgraceful.
Obviously, we are disappointed with the court's decision, but we are going to respect it. We understand the need for secrecy. We may disagree with it, but we will respect it. We find it outrageous that NSO will have the possibility to address the media as they will.
The Israeli company's technology gained even more notoriety this January when the Pegasus spyware was tied to an alleged attempt by the Saudi government to hijack Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos' smartphone. However, both the Saudi regime and NSO Group have denied any involvement.
Israel in general has a very high percentage of high-tech companies. Also, Israel is a very significant security exporter. Thus, Israel has a few of the world's leading security export high-tech companies. And we have found, specifically, that NSO Group's work violated, in our opinion, human rights around the world, and was also used to attack one of Amnesty International's employees around the world. So we have decided to go further into checking that, but we are also following other security companies, specifically high-tech companies. We are following other technologies other than NSO. We have to understand that if we, as people, even if we are not working with Amnesty International, but independently, if we don't demand our governments to send a clear message and to be very clear with their laws and legislations and regulatory work, then companies, whether they be security companies or regular companies, will perform surveillance. The ones who need to demand this change are civilians all over the world. The ones who need to set the law are legislators all around the world. And we know how that works. If it doesn't happen, then we all need to get used to living in a world where almost all of our secrets, all of our personal data will be exposed.
On October 2nd, 2018, journalist Jamal Khashoggi walked into the Saudi consulate in Turkey and never came back out. Around the time of his murder, a powerful spyware may have been used to surveil his family.
Activists, journalists, all are said to have been hacked by spyware developed by the Israeli company called the NSO Group.
A consortium of news outlets from around the world, including Frontline, have been investigating the use of the spyware called Pegasus and the Israeli company NSO Group that sells it to foreign governments.
The government can see anything on the phone, including pictures, contacts, listening into calls.
As part of the investigation into Pegasus, Washington Post reporter Dana Priest traveled to Istanbul. Working with the journalism nonprofit Forbidden Stories, the reporters were given access to 50,000 phone numbers concentrated in countries known to be NSO clients. They included journalists, politicians, human rights activists, and Jamal Khashoggi's fiancée, Hatice Cengiz. Dana Priest and a producer working for Frontline and Forbidden Stories met with Hatice to verify if her phone had in fact been hacked.
What I'm doing is basically a backup, and based on this backup we will look if there is any trace of infection, past or current. What we're looking for is traces of a software called Pegasus.
I remember the first days after the murder, a lot of times they try to hack my email. And then Gmail was sending to me emails that time. Someone tried to open your account or something like that.
The simple ones are like that message. The really sophisticated ones, they don't need a message. They don't need you to do anything.
Really?
Yeah.
But why people say the iPhone, the more safe to, no one can hack or...
That's what the iPhone says, the company. But it's not true. So the Pegasus software can, if it gets inside, I don't know if it gets inside every time it tries, but if it gets inside, it can turn your microphone on so that it can, whoever is doing it can listen to what you're saying and what other people are saying. But it also can go into your email, your WhatsApp, your contacts, your pictures, your videos, and it can just steal them all, make a copy of everything. And then, you know, our thought is, if it's doing that against people like you, who are not terrorists or criminals, then why? Part of what we want to show, what we think we know, what we are discovering, and what we're researching is, no, they use it against civilians. And why would they want to know what you're doing?
Yes, it's my personal life, it's my secret life. It is not enough to say, please stop after this murder. Please, Yani, it's over.
After getting backups of both Hatice's new phone and the one she was using at the time of Khashoggi's murder, Dana Priest sent them to Amnesty International's security lab for analysis. A few hours later, while on the way back to the airport, she received a call with the results.
I guess the spree of bad news is never ending. So I checked both the uploads. The new one seems clean to me. The old one, however, has some traces that seem consistent with what we've seen. So on the 6th of October of 2018 seems to have been a first compromise, which was followed by some additional traces on the 9th and then on the 12th, which is obviously, as you know, pretty timely within the context, obviously.
Yeah. Wow. She's already been infected, so it's already happened, so it's great that you're finding it.
Yeah, I don't think
There was now proof that Pegasus had been used to target one of the people closest to Jamal Khashoggi around the time of his death. In a statement, NSO Group said its technology was not associated in any way with Khashoggi's murder. The company said it was on a life-saving mission, preventing terror attacks and serious crimes. But in addition to Hatice, Frontline, Forbidden Stories, and the partner news outlets are investigating the cases of journalists, human rights activists, politicians, and others in more than 50 countries who may have been targeted for surveillance.
We don't know 100% what the connection is. We definitely know that every surveillance company that is considered by the Israeli government as a security surveillance has to get the approval of the Ministry of Defense. They have to. Also, we do know that there are forms of surveillance by the government, by security agencies. We definitely know that. And we know that the Israeli intelligence has a very, very big, strong intelligence unit that has to do not just with surveillance, but with high-tech development in general. So it is basically a place where from a lot of people, once they finish their mandatory military service, then they already get ahead and they can get into the high-tech industry very early on and with very, very good base. So we know that there is a good ground for this form of high-tech companies to grow, but still, the main important thing is the approval by the Ministry of Defense. So if it is not approved by the Ministry of Defense, then it cannot happen here. We just saw this morning, for instance, the reports on Israeli officials denying or approving or denying the approval of sale of F-35 fighter jets. We don't know anything about that, but we definitely know that in the UAE, in the United Arab Emirates, there have been used Pegasus, the program that is produced by NSO Group. We know that it's been used to arrest human rights activists. For instance, Mohammed Mansour, who is a very renowned Emirate human rights activist. And this couldn't have happened without the approval of the Ministry of Defense in Israel.
The Israel government is now investigating NSO, the technology firm whose spyware Pegasus has been allegedly used to target journalists, activists, politicians, and business executives across the world.
Israeli government officials visited the offices of the hacking company NSO Group on Wednesday. An investigation published last week by 17 global media outlets claims that phone numbers belonging to notable figures were targeted by the firm's spyware called Pegasus. The Ministry of Defense did not specify which government agencies were involved in the investigation. However, Israeli media previously reported that the Foreign Ministry, the Justice Ministry, the Mossad, and the Israeli military intelligence were looking into the company following the report.
Pegasus, the now notorious spyware, is NSO's best-selling product. But the company, that is facing global heat after the Pegasus project scandal exploded, maintains it has done no wrong.
Meanwhile, NSO, which has already denied the allegations according to which it has enabled unauthorized surveillance on mobile phones, said that it is working with full transparency with the Israeli authorities. They added that they are confident that this inspection will prove the facts are as they declared repeatedly by the company, and they believe that the allegations made recently by the media will be proven as wrong.
Despite the emphatic denials, trouble is mounting for NSO. The French government has said that it will question Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz after Emmanuel Macron's phone showed up on the leaked list. French prosecutors have already launched a probe. that would focus on the use of Pegasus spyware by Morocco's intelligence agencies. The investigation has been entrusted to France's Central Office for Combating Technology-Related Crime of Information and Communication, an arm of the judicial police. Mexico's president has also launched a probe into the software following revelations that the previous administration had used the software against him, his family members and advisors while he was running for president. Hungarian prosecutors have launched a probe into the alleged unlawful surveillance of critics of Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Human rights organizations have also said that they're alarmed over reports that 50,000 phones of high-profile people were hacked using the Israeli spyware Pegasus. UN Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet has called for regulating the sale, transfer and use of surveillance technology, while the European Commission chief has said the scandal is completely unacceptable. And trouble is only mounting for NSO. Reports suggest that the private equity company that owns the spyware company is being liquidated. London-based Novel Pina Capital, which bought the NSO group in 2019, is being dissolved after a dispute between its co-founders. Its liquidation leaves the future ownership of NSO unclear, just as the company is grappling with the fallout of a vast electronic espionage scandal.